Hello folks, Typhoon Carter here, and I bring to you DPP Revival Ubers Open. This is a round 1 matchup between RichardMillePlain and Inspirited. So, Richard, he's more of a face of the new guard of Ubers players, whereas for Inspirited's been around for a while. He's been playing for at least been on this site for about 10 years, if not more, at this point. And this is somebody that you'd normally see playing something like BW, DPP, or even ADV Ubers. So, Inspirited, somebody who I believe has actually played in SPL back when Ubers was a tier. Whereas for Richard, he's actually played in Smogon Champions League. And he's also played some OU and SPL as well. So, very respectable player. And Richard's somebody who has played in Smogon's Grand Slam, so he's quite well rounded in that regard. So this is a very exciting matchup to see in round 1. But that being said though, let's jump right into this. Hariyama lead, Deoxys attack lead. So interesting lead matchup here, as Hariyama usually it is there just because of fake out, so this means that it's especially good as an counter lead to something like Darkrai, and it matches up really well into something like T-Tar or even the likes of lead Dialga. And something like Deoxys attack, what Hariyama can do is just fake out, break the sash, and then threaten a KO with Bullet Punch because of how frail Deoxys attack is. Whereas for something like Deoxys speed, which is probably like D Uber's lead, it can at the very least fake out and then limit it to like one hazard and then go from there. Unless it is like Cobra, so that's where dynamics get interesting, and that's kind of where you would see Hariyama shine, especially with something like Toxic or being able to block status. Whereas for Deoxys attack, generally this is just a much more proactive version of Deoxys speed, simply because A, you have the option to fire off a really strong attack and then also set something like spikes up. Usually it will always run Focus Sash. And something you can do here, for example, it might run Superpower, it might run Thunder, it might run Cycle Boost. E-Speed is never dropped on DOA, so we'll see how Richard navigates this. Fakes out here, interesting choice for Richard to actually stay in. And Gus swapping to Kyogre, trying to scout the Bullet Punch, scout stat exactly, and the Kyogre's got threatened a possible KO on this Hariyama. And Latias into Latios, and don't forget Sodu is legal in this tier. Bronzong on Bronzong, so at this point I think both players are going to be able to get Stealth Rocks up. Something Richard could do here, for example, is he could bring something like Deoxys attack in on this Bronzong, because Bronzong really has no incentive to attack, and then this way Richard can ensure either he gets a really strong attack off like a Thunder in Rain, or he can get a Spike off before it goes down. Rocks up here, so both players doing the good old handshake. And Hariyama's gonna come in. Straight into Earthquake, so interesting. Richard was probably expecting maybe a Dialga to come in, and that payback was clearly a prediction, trying to predict Giratina Origin coming in, or even Latias, but not gonna happen here. Close combat's here, and Hariyama's got one more attack, and Richard is just going to Thunder. Tyranitar's going to be a follow-up here, and T-Tar in Ubers, much like in OU, is a very good check to Latias, even though Sodu means that Latias always has a +1 boost built in to special attack and Spadef, as you all know. And this Tyranitar, now based on what Inspirited has here, I would not be surprised if this Bronzong perhaps had Trick Room, and that this is a CB Tar, which would be a good offensive Trick Room abuser, and then it could be paired with something like Trick Room Dialga, which normally might be a mix attacker with something like Outrage, Draco, and then like some coverage moves. So there's a few ways that can operate, and then usually Inspirited on something like this will probably have some speed control. Draco's here, gonna do 44%. And Richard is okay taking that trade. Pursuit's there, nothing too crazy. Kyogre's gonna come in, reset the weather, going to threaten a huge Hydro. Hydro's gonna get the job done here. And you really see in Ubers how this is a game of sacks. And Bronzong's gonna come in here, and the tricky thing here for Richard is you don't want to waste this explosion. And Inspirited's gonna go into this trying to cover that up. Really nice double there from Richard, anticipating that Bronzong entry and going to at least get one strong attack off before the Deoxys attack goes down. So got some okay mileage out of that, and Kyogre could threaten a possible KO here, but instead going to be get caught over predicting there, trying to predict the Latias. And Darkrai's gonna come in here, and this is a really awkward dynamic for both players, because for Inspirited, this Rayquaza could reasonably be Choice Scarf. It could also be DD, but one thing is for certain, that it is not Lumberry if it is back Ray 9 out of 10 times. Now for his Darkrai, what Richard has to be wary of is if this is Ice Beam Darkrai on Scarf, then Inspirited should feel completely threatened, because that's going to beat that. And then the Darkrai here could just be something like Lumberry. Darkrai could be Chopo-Rai, for example, and then it could try to force a sleep on the Rayquaza, because E-Speed will probably not kill it, but if it is Scarf into, like, say, a Resist Berry Darkrai, then Richard might be in a little bit of trouble. Dark Void's here, so this tells me that Inspirited either does not have a great Sleep Sack, or that was a Scarfer. And Darkrai's got a nasty plot here, so no, it was just a DD Ray, and gonna get Water Spouted by the Scarf Ogre, and Kabutops is gonna come in, and Kabu can actually be a threat here. And Inspirited, oh, interesting, probably realized that the Ogre was gonna be dead anyways, but this Kabutops could actually clean things up here, and has to land Stone Edges multiple times. So this might be a CB Kabu if Inspirited stayed in. And Ray's gonna go down, and Richard's gonna win this game 1. So quite the tight end game here, because the Kabutops needed to land 4 Stone Edges in a row. And Richard saying that he got a little lucky there, landing all 4. And that would have been a very hectic endgame, and there was actually a real world where a draw could have occurred, funnily enough. And the other thing worth knowing about Ray is that Ray, because of Airlock, meant that Bronzong was going to get scorched by Fire Blast. So just something worth noting as a FYI. And that said though, you know, Kabutops on DOA Rain offense, pretty cool addition. But generally Kabutops has to compete with something like Quillfish for a slot on these as a physical attacker, because again, Waterfall plus Low Kick plus Stone Edge generally covers just about everything you could ask for. And again, but I think for Inspirited, the question is, could he have tried to sack the Latios instead and then save the Kyogre as a revenge killer? And I think that's an interesting conversation to have, because of the fact that, one, if you let the Latios go, for Inspirited, he could just go into Ogre and then click Surf a bazillion times and then try to threaten a KO on Darkrai that way. And then on top of that, with the Rayquaza, what you can do here is that you can still keep it intact if it is a mixed Rayquaza to threaten the Kabutops, due to the fact that Airlock cancels out Rain. Although funnily enough, Rain does not show that it's being cancelled out by Airlock in this gen, so that just seems a little silly, but not the point though. Let's go into game 2. Here we are. Kyogre lead. So we got Kyogre Mirror here, and both players have a reason to either switch out or stay in. And Kyogre can be a bazillion sets here, whether it is Thunder Wave, whether it is Hydro, you name it. But what's going to be interesting here, I think, is going to be how both players approach this, because it could tell us what their sets are. Kyogre's going to be swapped out, and Inspirited going to Thunder Wave here. So this is probably Lumberry Kyogre, which is normally used as a way to deal with lead Darkrai. If it tries to Dark Void and then you trade the T-Wave, you're winning that trade every time. Richard probably realized that he might not KO Inspirited's Kyogre, so it could be an offensive Ogre, and maybe he thought that there was a possibility that it was a Wackenberry Ogre. We don't know for sure. Calm Mind's up here into his Stealth Rocks. Dialga could roar this out, perhaps. Yep, that's gonna happen, and Gyarados is shown. So Gyarados is not something you actually see a lot in DV Ubers, but if I had to take a guess, it's probably still got the whole DD thing going on. But I imagine what Gyarados offers here in Rain, besides the Rain boosted waterfalls, is perhaps the fact that you could taunt something like a Scarm, perhaps, and then try to put some pressure on it that way. That's something that I think Gyarados offers on top of Intimidate, which means that it could be a soft check to Groudon, which if you think about it, a lot of Groudons in Ubers typically just run something like Rock Polish SD, EQ Fire Punch, Dragon Claw. That Gyarados technically walls it. We're going to see how Inspirited approaches this, going to swap out because of Thunder, and Bronzong's going to be there to take that, and Bronzong going to get Parrot on the way, but it will be able to get Rocks up hopefully, and Fortress is shown. Interesting. So Fortress going to come in here, probably got set T-Spikes. And yep, there's T-Spikes. T-Spikes in Uber is extremely powerful because of the fact that, one, something like Clef is not ran as much. And oh, Bulk Up here. This might be Bulk Up Rest Talk. Dialga. Oh, huge crit there. That might have actually not killed. And Groudon's going to come in here. Go ahead, threaten the Earthquake. Going to do significant damage to Inspirited's Dialga. And that Outrage, no joke either. And usually why you might see Outrage on this is because of the fact that you want something like, whatchamacallit. Wait, hold on, but Darkrai's gonna threaten this. Dark Void's here. As I was saying, the thing with Dialga, usually the reason you'll see Bulk Up Outrage Dialga is usually it's a fantastic last Pokemon situation to get around something like a stall team, which may not have the adequate tools to handle it. And Outrage's PP, because of the way it works, since you're locked into a move 2 free turns, that means that you actually have more attacks. You have much more than, say, 24 PP. In reality, it's probably closer to 40, 50, depending on how many you get. Anyways, Darkrai forces the sleep on Kyogre here. Inspirited's own Kyogre is going to come in, pop the Lumberry, and Fortress is going to come in, and this Kyogre will threaten it out. And it has to go into Groudon here in order to reset the weather. And Inspirited's going to take this time to Calm Mind up here. And the Groudon's going to do significant damage. And it's going to go down. And Giratina is going to come in. So regular Giratina, not something you see a whole lot. And what makes Giratina altered, per se, interesting in the Uber's landscape is the fact that, one, this is something you normally see on stall teams or extremely bulky offense, and because this Giratina showing Protect, what this tells me is that Richard's Giratina is probably sub-Protect CM Dragon Pulse, so Vintina, if you want to call it that. Actually, yeah, that sounds like a cool name. I'm keeping that. Anyways, so with Giratina, the reason why it might stick out over Giratina Origin is the fact that it is not item locked and it can actually run leftovers. So that is a really important distinction to make, because even though this makes Giratina much less threatening offensively, it makes it extremely hard to break defensively, especially because it has something like Will-O-Wisp, which is a fantastic noob check, to put it simply, or toxic for that matter. Ice Beam's here and gonna get roared out instead, so this is not Roartina, but, or rather Sub-Roartina, or, man, that sounds like a mouthful. But yeah, so that's why I think this is actually particularly interesting. And then Gyarados is gonna come in here, probably going to threaten a taunt, perhaps. And yeah, there's the taunt into the Crest. And Crest without Sun is a bit neutered, but this bulky offense that Richard's got, interesting to see like Kyogre and Groudon, so I think he really values that weather control on this team. And Crest, for all intents and purposes, is kind of useless in this game, especially with Taunt Gyarados being a factor here. And then you really see that Sand is not slowing it down, it's actually getting health back. And it's got DD up here. Got Ice Beam. Ice Beam's only doing 17%, but Inspirited is going to go up to +2 here. That should be fast enough to outspeed every, or rather almost every relevant Scarfer except for something like Scarf Darkrai. Ice Beams again, and the Crest is going to go down. And Giratina Altered is going to come in. Protects here, and Inspirited's just going to taunt this thing just to make sure that it is not going to do any nonsense. Outrage is here. Fortress is going to come in. Probably going to force an explosion, perhaps. But to be frank, Inspirited should be favored here. Oh, Rapid Spin's here, so this might not have explosion. Crits here. And oh, it's Payback, which makes sense because you want to have something to deal with Deoxys speed lead. And Warfall's here. And Kyogre's the last, and Garchomp's going to come in. Okay. That's playing with fire a bit there. And oh, it is a Scarf Ogre. So that explains a lot. Surf's here. And Darkrai's going to come in. And it is very much a Scarf Darkrai. And Inspirited is going to tie this up 1-1. And we are going to be going to a game free. Anyways, that being said though, this game was quite interesting, seeing something like Gyarados, which is actually not very common, and Ubers make an appearance, and it really goes to show you the depth of DPP Ubers as a tier as a whole, when even something like regular OU Pokemon that you might not think of seeing, like a Gyarados, makes an appearance. So interesting stuff to see, and that being said though, let's go into game free. Rayquaza lead, Tyranitar lead. So interesting lead matchup here because of Airlock. This means that this Ray, if it has Focus Sash, means that it will never get broken up by sand, and it could threaten a KO on this T-Tar with something like Brick Break. Now even something like Outrage, for example, will still do significant damage to T-Tar, and if you're Richard, depending on what your set is, you either will probably get rocks out, or you're very defensively bulky and hoping that it is not Brick Break, that you're probably EV to take an Outrage and then pop the Cuss Staff and then go from there. So Inspirited's got Outrage here, so it was in fact a Focus Sash. And gotta go into Bronzong here, gotta catch the Rayquaza locked into Outrage, and that might be CB damage. And Trick Room is going to go up here. And Inspirited's his own answer is going to be his own Bronzong, as he's going to attempt to stall this out. Rocks are going to be up here, could friend an explosion, but Palkia instead is going to be the answer. And straight into Bronzong. And Inspirited will probably go back to Bronzong here, trying to absorb the explosion. Does exactly that. So interestingly enough, I think this team that Richard's bringing, to my knowledge, normally a team like this will have something like a Laddie Twin. It will most certainly have something like offensive Dialga as a Trick Room abuser. That's a secondary route you can go. Something like slow Giratina Origin could also work too on these kind of Trick Room or semi-room structures that Richard's got. And Trick Room is very much, as you can see, a extremely viable strat due to the fact that some Pokemon, even like Dialga, can be either extremely fast or extremely slow due to the centralized speed tier. We're gonna see what the follow-up here is. Palkia is shown, so that makes sense because you want to have a way to deal with opposing Kyogre. And Surf's gonna come in here, and Inspirited's gonna bring Groudon to reset the sun. And Palkia's gonna come in. Oh, okay. And I guess sack the Tyranitar here for a safe entry, and Dialga is a huge threat now, especially with Bronzong out of the equation. And Rayquaza is going to be used as the sacrificial fodder. Groudon's going to come in here, and Spirited's probably hoping that it's going to survive this. It does. And EQ's just going to take care of things, and Palkia's going to come in here. And the big thing I think you should take away from this as you're watching this, sorry for pauses, is that one, you really see how every percent matters here, as even though it seems like letting the Dialga go might seem a little bit ill-advised, you can really see how something like Groudon can be extremely hard to kill, and Richard didn't want anything else to take unnecessary damage such as the Palkia, such as the Kyogre. So he was okay with letting the Dialga just kind of let the Dragon Pulse rip on this Groudon. And oh, interesting, and this Palkia is Trick Room itself. Again, not unheard of. It seems counterintuitive, but it does kind of make sense when you look at Richard's team. It's just extremely slow. It's dedicated to, you know, being able to put a lot of pressure on, and Richard sending the Kyogre in just to put some pressure on this Darkrai and to absorb his sleep safely by resetting Weather. And Thunder's gonna take care of Inspirited's Palkia, and you really see how even though Palkia is one of the most reliable Ogre checks, it can't do it for long. And Kyogre is going to eat this Dark Void, and Darkrai's gonna come in itself. This might be Scarf Darkrai. No, it's actually, perhaps that was Chopo Rai. We don't know for sure. Mewtwo's the last here. Got Ice Beam here, no Aura Sphere. Oh, misses the Dark Void. That actually hella sucks. Because that would have made things a little easier. And Palkia's gonna come in, probably gonna try to trade this safely. Grass Knot's here, and Surf's gonna do the job. So Richard's gonna win this series 2-1, extremely tight series to say the least, and pretty cool stuff to see from both players. Richard's gonna move on to stay on winners bracket side, whereas Inspirited's gonna be sent down to losers. So tough draw to have in round 1, and because this is a zero-sum game, somebody's gotta lose. Anyways, that being said though, if you guys enjoyed this video, like, comment, subscribe, and consider donating to DPP Ubers prize pool, and I will see you guys next time.